in the house he knew. But not to worry. She'd be there soon, and they could go back to their apartment and their lives. Nathaniel had then explained to Stefanie, his wife, that Tammy, a woman he had met only once and with whom he had never had a real conversation before. This woman didn't even say hello. She just began talking, telling him that she was coming to pick up the kid with barely an acknowledgement that Nathaniel was even on the line. And then she gave him instructions for packing. Nathaniel told Stefanie that the mother-in-law basically patronized both of them by implying that these few days with Jack had been a burden for them. He told Stefanie that his brother's mother-in-law conveyed this information to him with such flippant urgency, almost an annoyance at having to convey it to him, so that he'd felt reproached and stupid, like he should have somehow known this information, and he hadn't known how to react and therefore hadn't reacted, except to say, "Okay, that all sounds great. Thanks, Tammy." Now, a day after that call, thinking about when to call this Tammy woman back and what he would say to her, Nathaniel watched Stefanie looking through the cabinets for what she said was a strainer. They were in the kitchen of Nathaniel's brother's cabin-like home. They had driven nearly 3 hours from Charlotte, where they lived and worked, driven into the mountains, to be there with Jack in the home that Nicholas had built. Besides the appliances, the kitchen itself, the wood floors, the wood cupboards and drawers, the counters of poured concrete, had been constructed, like the rest of the house, by Nicholas. Every place Nathaniel looked, every space he occupied in the house, he felt his brother. He didn't know how many times he'd cried. He remembered being in the bathroom a few days ago, and how he dropped his toothbrush and was reminded that he'd helped Nicholas lay the tile, and how Nicholas had eventually kicked him out of the bathroom because it was too small for both of them to be working in. And when Nathaniel had stood up in an annoyed hurry, he'd smacked his head against his brother's chin as he was standing, hit his brother's chin so hard with the top of his head that he could hear the clack of Nicholas's teeth, and when Nicholas uncovered his mouth and spit into his hand, Nathaniel had seen both blood and maybe a quarter of Nicholas's tongue. They had to go to the ER, where a doctor sewed the tongue back on. When he had dropped his toothbrush, all this moved through his mind, making him see something other than what he was seeing, which was also what he was doing now, standing in the kitchen with Stefanie. Seeing something other than what was right in front of him, being somewhere else. In order to correct this, instead of thinking about dropping the toothbrush and remembering how that caused him to remember Nicholas's tongue, now, in the kitchen with Stefanie, he tried to look at everything without letting it remind him of anything, to just see what he was seeing. Out the windows above the kitchen sink, a constant rain fell, a sound that was at once one sound and many, a padding sound on the grass, a tinny sound on the roof, a thudding sound on the wood of the porch. Stefanie had failed in finding the strainer and was now cleaning potatoes at the sink, potatoes she had picked from the garden, scrubbing them with a little wire brush, which caused mud to streak through the running water in the porcelain sink. For the first couple of days, they'd gotten by on sandwiches, but now she wanted to cook. She told Nathaniel, while she scrubbed the potatoes, that he had to call this Tammy woman back. He said he couldn't call her back. What was he going to say? "I can't remember a single time I've addressed the woman by name," he said. "I've only met her once at Nicholas's wedding, where she told me that her daughter had almost married a guy who lived in California, some guy named Desmond, who was now in the Secret Service. She told me she had no idea why April had chosen to be with my brother, but she had. So, she was going to support her daughter, though, come on, she'd said. Secret Service or anthropologist?" Stefanie shook her head, her dark hair, which was in a ponytail, swinging. Jack, Nathaniel's 4-year-old nephew, was napping in his bedroom. Nathaniel walked down the hall and looked into the boy's room. Jack was still sleeping, his breath deep and steady, his body turned away, covered, his black hair messed from sleep. Out the window, a stream flowed beside the cabin. The steady rain that fell from the slate-gray sky muffled the sound of the stream, so that Jack, if he woke, wouldn't even notice the sound of the running water, Nathaniel thought. Nathaniel felt the privacy of the rain like a blanket enclosing the cabin. A half-mile away, there was a barn where his dead brother did his carpentry. Had once done, Nathaniel thought. And further along the property, a greenhouse and larger outdoor garden, all of which Nathaniel, standing at Jack's bedroom door, had forgotten about to some degree until arriving.